Hello and welcome to Simply Balanced, the podcast where we dive into, all things balanced. I'm your host, Taylor Grosso, a registered dietitian with a passion to helping you find your unique balance girl aesthetic in this often hectic world. Each episode will explore different facets of living a balanced life, whether it's unraveling the latest nutrition trends, discovering mindful eating strategies, or discussing tips for a balanced lifestyle that fits your routine. Balance isn't about perfection, it's about making choices that feel right for you, nurturing your body and mind, and enjoying life's simple pleasures. So whether you're sipping your morning coffee, heading out for a walk, or winding down for the evening, I'm thrilled to have you join me. So let's dive in and talk, all things balanced. Hello, besties, and welcome back to another episode of Simply Balanced. As always, thank you so much for being here, and I love you guys in this community so much. Today's topic is going to be one that's a little bit close to home and a little bit more of a sensitive topic. I'm going to be talking about my personal mental health journey. After years and years and years of misdiagnosis, I was diagnosed with ADHD this past year, which was somewhat of a challenging diagnosis, and I think I'm still kind of digesting it, and a lot of that has to do with external stigma, which I'm going to dive into a lot of different components of this. But I just kind of want to tell you a little bit about my story and my journey and let you know that your mental health is important, and it's really important to also take care of it. So never be ashamed for asking for help and also getting the guidance when you need. So let's dive right on in and talk about all of the things mental health. All right, so I want to start from the very beginning of this journey because I have pretty much just been what you would call an anxious girly my entire life. Like pretty much from the time that I can remember kind of being more of an adolescent or an adult, so kind of my teenage years, I remember being anxious, a perfectionist, just struggling. And something that kind of relates back to ADHD that I never really recognized until I started to learn about all of the signs and symptoms of ADHD, which I'll dive into a little bit, because I think a lot of people just think it's the inability to focus, right? Like you oftentimes hear that like, oh my God, squirrel. Like, yes, don't get me wrong. I definitely have some struggles with focusing, but there's so much more intertwined into what ADHD truly is. And I don't think enough people talk about it. And I think that's why there is such a stigma around it. But like I said, always been an anxious perfectionist girly. And when it came to school and when it came to sports, I was very disciplined, but I was never naturally good at them. And what I mean by that is it took a lot of mental effort for me to be good at sports and for me to be good at school. Like I had to work a lot harder, at least it felt like to me, than a lot of my peers who it seemed to just come more naturally to. And I'm also a very determined and resilient person. And that was always too why I never really thought about ADHD because like I said, the stigmas and the perceptions of ADHD are you're unorganized, you can't get anything done. I was the polar opposite of that. If you want shit done, I will get shit done. I am a very determined person and I'm very type A. I love spreadsheets, I love itineraries, I love lists, and I love to-do lists. But what I found out with my diagnosis of ADHD is that there's a component to it that can actually be tied very heavily into perfectionism, which is what correlates to me struggling in sports and in school as kind of an adolescent and into some of my adult years. Because when you feel this intense pressure to be good at something and it takes that much effort for you to be good at something, then you almost overcompensate to the point of wanting to be perfect. You can also be in this all or nothing mindset, which we all know that your girl was in the all or nothing mindset with a lot of things in life, especially when it came to nutrition and fitness, which honestly all makes a lot of sense now with this diagnosis as well, where it was like, if I'm not eating perfectly, if I'm not perfect in school, if I'm not perfect at this sport, then why the hell should I do it? And so that's why I worked so hard to this perfectionism standpoint and really struggled with failure. Like failing is something that has been really challenging to me all my life. Like you can ask my husband about me in golf because we are not friends for the fact that I'm not good at it and I don't want to get good at it because every time I feel like I'm making progress, I end up failing. I'm not good at things that I don't necessarily pick up right away. And I've learned that that comes from that place of ADHD. But I want to fast forward a little bit because I will be totally honest, in like high school and college, I was very much, like I said, an anxious type A perfectionist girly, but it was always to the point where I felt like I could healthfully manage it on my own. Like I had never been to therapy, I had never been medicated, and I kind of just thought that this was how my brain was supposed to work, and I was just a little bit anxious. And then fast forward to we moved to Colorado in 2020. It was a really big change. I had a lot of emotions at first, but then things got a lot better as time went on. Once again, was still a very anxious girly, but was doing okay to still the point where I didn't feel that I needed additional help and I didn't need medication. Now, my husband had been to a psychiatrist. He had been on medication prior. So I had an idea of, and I had people in my family who had also been on medication or who had also had mental health struggles. So it wasn't that I was against it. It was more so that I had this mindset of, I think, kind of leaning into that perfectionism of, I can do this on my own and I don't really need anybody else's help. And I certainly don't need a medication's help in order to manage my mental health. But fast forward even a little bit more, we got engaged in October of 2021, which is obviously incredibly blissful, incredibly joyful, and incredibly happy. But for some reason, for me, wedding planning was one of like, and it's so weird to reflect back on now because like, I low-key loved planning my wedding, but also felt so much stress and pressure. And I think I also put a lot of pressure on my looks. Like, I will say that my wedding season, although I was able to not slip back into a lot of my old orthorexic habits, it was one of the first times in my recovery journey that I like significantly thought about it because there is so much fucking pressure on the internet to look and feel the best that you've ever looked on your wedding day. And I 100% gave into that. I got the facials, I got the Botox, I did all of the things. And it was like, now looking back, it was really silly because my husband proposed to me and he loved me for the exact way that I was, but yet I was trying to change everything about myself for the day of our wedding. Not necessarily change everything about myself, but, tweak some things that I didn't think were perfect enough. And it got to the point where the stress and the pressure had gotten so heightened that I was having a conversation with Zach and I just broke down in tears and I was like, I don't think that I can manage this anxiety on my own anymore. Like it's to the point where it's negatively affecting my everyday life. I feel constantly anxious about everything because I think there's a difference between anxiety of just like, I have a big presentation at work, so I'm nervous and anxious about it. But I was having anxiety doing anything in my life. Like it did not matter. Everything made me anxious and it all made my brain just spiral in a million different directions. And like I said, it was also heavily related to my appearance leading up to the wedding. And I think there was a large part of it too, where I recognized the way that I was feeling about the pressures of how to look. And I didn't want to go back into my orthorexic habits, but I also felt that side of my brain pulling me so hard that it was just this constant spiral of anxiety. And at this time, I was also just starting out posting on social media like consistently. I was working a full-time job. I was planning a wedding. We lived far away from our parents. Zach was in like 3 weddings that year. In all honesty, we had very little money. Like we were living pretty much paycheck to paycheck at that time. And it was just all very overwhelming at once. So I went to my primary care provider and I did my yearly physical and I kind of explained some of the things that were going on, got diagnosed with generalized anxiety, and then I got put on Lexapro. And I took Lexapro for, I think, about 4-ish months. I started it in May of 2022, and then I came off of it in August of 2022. And I did not realize this until afterwards, but the reason that I ended up coming off of it was because I was having gnarly side effects. Like I felt like it definitely relieved some of my anxiety, but I was having these like heart palpitations when I was exercising, like literally walking on the treadmill, not at an incline, walking flat. My heart rate would be like 170, 180. I can specifically remember a workout where I was doing step-ups and my heart rate went above 200. And I was like, that is absolutely not normal. So I went to the doctor and they were, concerned. And we at first did not think it was linked to the medication at all. And they tested me for POTS syndrome. We did a cardiogram, I think is what it's called, where they like hook you up to all the things. My heart is like as healthy as it can possibly be. So the doctor was like, I I don't really know. Like, if you think it's maybe the medication, then maybe we should wean off of it and come off of it. What I figured out was that I was taking an acne supplement at the time that had 5-HTP. 5-HTP interacts with SSRIs, and it can cause serotonin overdose, which can cause a lot of the symptoms that I was experiencing. And I say this too because I think that there are a lot of us who might be on any sort of mental health medication. And I was the one who figured out that connection, not my doctor. And this is not like a gripe on doctors or like a dig on doctors by any means. It's more so just being aware and asking those questions if you're on a mental health medication and you're also interested in wellness and you're potentially on supplements, because there are apparently a lot of supplements that can interact with SSRIs and other mental health medications. So if you're on a mental health medication, please, please, please ask your doctor before starting any singular supplement, because that was most definitely the correlation that was happening, was that 5-HTP was just causing my serotonin to go way too high, which is why I was experiencing all those weird heart arrhythmias. So like I said, I came off of Lexapro in August of 2022. During this time, I had also started seeing an online therapist, and for the price that I was paying for it, I just didn't feel like we were clicking. I didn't feel like we were hitting it off. I had previously tried a therapist one other time when I was around 18 or 19, and I was going through a really hard time in my life, but it once again just kind of didn't click. I didn't really get any benefit from it. So I was like, maybe therapy is just not necessarily for me. Now therapy is literally my favorite day of the week, but we will get more into that. And so then we get married in October of 2022. And obviously I'm in pure newlywed bliss for a month afterwards. And then you get all your pictures, and then you get all your videos, and then the wedding blues smack you in the face because you spent a year planning this big old thing that consumed so much of your brain for so much time. And then now it's just done and it's over. And I needed a new project to hyperfixate on, which we will get into how that coincides with ADHD. But at the time, I had no idea. And I was still kind of in this state where I was like, okay, my anxiety is pretty well managed for the most part. I feel better now that the wedding's over. I think that was the main driver of kind of feeling this way. And then fast forward again in May of 2023, so about a year from right now, we moved back to Des Moines. Now, this was a really, really hard transition for me. I think that there was a lot of things that had happened here in Iowa in my college years and in my high school years, with ex-boyfriends, with my eating disorder, with a lot of different things where it just brought up a lot from my past. And I think, this is a lot of stuff that I've unwound in therapy, but Colorado, all I had was these positive memories because I had made so many friends. My best friend lives in Colorado. I had, I was able to go be outdoors and outside every single weekend, which is something I enjoy. I got engaged there. We got our dog there. There was just so much happiness intertwined in Colorado. But at the same time, there was so much happiness intertwined with being near our family and friends. And that was something that was more important to us than being in Colorado. And quite frankly, Colorado is also really fucking expensive. So we were realistically, are we going to be able to afford a house here? And that's kind of what it ended up boiling down to. And the major decision and driver of why we moved back was affordability, and then also just being close to family again. And so when we got back, I just went through a lot of transition and change. And I think it was really hard on me because at the time, Zach had just kind of transferred jobs. So his company that he was working for in Denver is actually based out of Des Moines. So he was able to kind of transfer to the same situation, the same job. A lot of his life didn't necessarily kind of flip upside down. And now I'm not saying that he didn't struggle as much as I did, but my life got completely flipped upside down because when I was living in Colorado, I had a very flexible job. I had a job that I absolutely freaking loved. And then we moved back, and the only job that I could get at the time was a job at a gym here. And it was a job where I was in person every single day. It was commission-based only. I had a ton of sales pressure, just kind of a lot of emotions and feelings that I had never felt before, which was very, very challenging for me to kind of navigate. And about 8 weeks into me doing that job, I came home and I looked at Zach. I had about 50,000 followers at this time. I looked at Zach and I was like, let me quit my job and I will make money online. And he was like, okay, I trust you. I know that you're determined enough. I know that you'll make it happen. And so that's what I did. I walked in the next day, I put in my 2 weeks, and I ended up, being successful online. I worked a contract job for a couple of months after that just to kind of have some part-time sustained income, but quit that job in December of 2023 and then started full-time for myself January 2024. But the anxiety and depression wasn't just stemming from the job. There was just a lot of me really missing aspects of Colorado, the being outdoors constantly, the weather, the walking accessibility, the food that I had access to. It was just something that was really hard for me to kind of adjust back to a whole different lifestyle. And on top of that, working for yourself, while yes, such a wonderful blessing, and I'm so happy that this is my job, working completely remote from home can also be incredibly isolating. And not to mention that Zach has a lot of friends here in the Des Moines area. He has a lot of friends from high school. He has a lot of friends from college. I have a much smaller friend group, and every single one of my friends, well, I have a couple of friends that live here, but a majority of my friends live out of state, not necessarily just in Colorado. I have friends in California. I have friends in Texas. I have friends in Colorado. I have friends in Kansas City. I have friends all over the United States. And so I think that that was something that was really hard for me when we moved back, was just that I felt like I had kind of lost an aspect of that because I did have much more friends when we were in Denver and when we were in Colorado. And it was all just a really big transition. And it was the first time in my life where I had felt depression. I was like, I genuinely am not motivated to work out. I just don't feel happy. I was crying all the time, and I just felt bad because also Zach was having to deal with those emotions. And I didn't want him to feel like he had to constantly take care of my emotions. I needed to learn how to manage those on my own. And so that was when we finally sat down in, I think it was September or October of 2023. And we were like, we have to go, you have to go to therapy. We just need to get started somewhere. So I went to therapy. I had actually gotten recommended to a therapist by a close friend, and she was like, I think you guys will hit it off. She's wonderful. Your personalities are very similar, and I'm going to connect you guys. And I was like, okay, sounds great. So I started working with her, and now I go to her every single week. Literally one of the biggest blessings in my life, and has helped me learn so much about myself. And I feel like I've gained so much emotional intelligence since working in therapy. And it just has really helped shape me into a better person. But I went into my first session with her and I was like, here's everything that I've been dealing with. I feel very anxious. I feel very depressed. I've tried Lexapro in the past. It did not work for me. I'm not really sure that I'm open to medication. I don't talk about this a lot, but I don't really take medicine. So I don't really take ibuprofen. I don't really just take any sort of medication. A lot of that has to do with the fact, I believe I've told this story on the podcast when I gave my story on, the ulcer and kind of my entire orthorexic journey, that at that time, I think the ibuprofen causing that ulcer and kind of tying that back into, my orthorexia days and using that as a crutch. I understand that that's not the case now if I do take it, which is why I do take it sporadically, but I really try my best to kind of not take medications. And so I kind of went in with this idea of I'm not going to take medicine, but I really want to be in therapy. And so, we were going through that initial session where they do a lot of tests and analysis and are asking you a lot of questions about your childhood and your life. And we get to the end of the session and she's like, do you have anyone who has neurodivergency in your family? And I was like, I have no clue what that is. And she was like, ADHD. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And she was like, well, a lot of kind of the things you're describing that you're struggling with are actually coinciding with ADHD. And once again, me being, having that stigma and mindset that it's oh, ADHD people just don't get anything done. They're unorganized. And I was like, no, I think my brain's just all over the place all the time. But that's just how women are. My therapist looked at me and she goes, no, that's actually not how that's supposed to work. Your brain is not supposed to feel like it's going in a billion different directions at all times. And it's not supposed to feel like it's never quiet. And I was like, really? People have brains that are quiet? And she was like, yeah, neurotypical people have brains that are quiet. And I was like, oh, That's a wild concept to think about. She was like, I think a really good next step for you, I know that like right now you're a little bit hesitant on medication, but I still think it would be good to see a psychiatrist and get a proper diagnosis. So the following week, I went and saw a psychiatrist and I did all of the tests to be diagnosed with a variety of different conditions, anxiety, depression, ADHD, ADD, all of those types of things. And I was diagnosed with ADHD, and there's two different types. There's inattentive and there's hyperactivity. You can be both. I am both. I hit the criteria for every single mark on every single hyperactivity and inattentiveness, which is, now that I like understand it, makes a lot of sense. But at the time I was like, no, like I'm just anxious. But what I found out is that ADHD can weigh in and make you feel like you're anxious. And there's a lot of women who are misdiagnosed with anxiety for ADHD because we just think that we're supposed to have it all together. We think that our brain is supposed to work like that it's supposed to be in a million different directions. And last night I wrote down a bunch of the things that I never really realized were ADHD symptoms until I like talked through everything with my psychiatrist. So number one is small tasks take a lot of brain power. So I would have something as simple as like calling my doctor's office and making an appointment or returning a package to UPS. I would put those things off until the absolute last moment I had to do them. Those are tasks that realistically take 5 minutes, but for some reason, they are so hard for my brain to do and for my brain to actually come up with the task that needs to be done and then complete it. And I never understood why it took so much fucking brain power for me to do these teeny tiny small tasks. Number two is if I don't see it, I forget it. My husband made fun of me for so many years because I have a bajillion tabs on my computer at all times, but I'm a business owner. I run Simply Healthy, I run Pesce. Well, I run Pesce with my husband. And then I also have a variety of other things that I'm doing throughout the course of the day with content creation, brand deals, all sorts of things. And so because my business also requires me to have my headspace in different directions throughout the day, I have to have a million tabs open. Like if I close that tab, that task is not going to get done. I am going to completely forget about it. Even if it's written down somewhere, probably still going to forget about it. If I don't see it, I forget it. The same thing when it comes to like, I'm thinking of an example that happened last night. So I have this like organizer thing in my top drawer for like socks and underwear and bras and stuff. And that thing is falling completely apart. It's been falling apart for a really long time. I need to replace it and need nicer ones. I've been thinking about replacing it for 2 weeks. And every time I open my drawer, I'm like, oh, I gotta place an order and replace that. I gotta place an order and replace that. Finally, last night, I opened the drawer, I looked at it, I picked up my phone, and I placed the Amazon order. If I don't see it, I forget it. And I'm not reminded about it until I see it again. So this is where I have to constantly like leave myself little reminders so that I am able to actually make sure that my tasks get done. Number three, obsessing or hyperfixating. So this was things for me like food or shopping. Like I would see something shopping wise, like a pair of shoes or a jacket or a shirt, or like when we first moved into our house, like I needed it to be complete right away. And I would like hyperfixate, but then I would impulse shop. Like I would buy things that I didn't actually like, and it resulted in us throwing a lot of things out. But also me having to make a ton of returns, which we already talked about how much brain space that takes. But it was basically like just this impulsivity tied to like obsessing and fixation. And this also tied back into food for me as well. Like I always said like, oh, I have hyperfixation foods. Like I constantly eat the same thing all the time. Like for 2 years, I made the same oatmeal bowl until one morning I ate it and I was like, I never want to eat this again. And I will go through phases like that with certain foods, certain snacks, certain desserts, certain breakfasts, where it's like I obsess over it. I hyperfixate on it. It's like my favorite thing in the entire world. And then all of a sudden one day I'm like, the texture of this, I can't do it anymore. And also kind of tying into that, just like the textures of certain foods. Like if I get a piece of chicken that tastes weird or has a weird texture, I'm not eating the rest of the bowl. Like that is just simply how it goes. Number 4, impulsive purchases to get a dopamine hit. So like I said, this was also something that I really struggled with. I would be kind of like in one of these moods where I was definitely seeking dopamine. And at the time I didn't know that. And I would just put like, I'd have like 10 things that I've been wanting to order for a really long time and I would purchase them all at once, which it's like, at that time, I did not have the money to be doing that. And then I would feel super guilty after the fact and be like, we don't have the money for this. Like, I need to now return all of these things. But then sometimes the things would arrive and I would like them and I wouldn't want to return them. So I just had these like impulsive habits, especially for me, it was a lot when it came to shopping. I know that that can be related to like risk taking for a lot of other individuals who have ADHD in adulthood. But for me, it was really related to like retail therapy and those dopamine hits that came along with that. Number 5, I kind of already went into this with like my perfectionism tied to ADHD, is that I would get so overwhelmed with doing something perfect that I do nothing at all until I have literally no choice. Like the very first time that I released a course, so this was like a little over 6 or 7 months ago, I literally finished that course in 2 days because I started advertising it. I started sharing it like 3 weeks ahead of time, but I was like, no, I have plenty of time to do it. I don't want to do it right now. I'll do it later. All of these different types of things. And then it got to where it was 48 hours until it was time to submit it and people were going to be logged in and have access to it. And I had to bust it out in 48 hours, which is not healthy and is why a lot of the times leading into number 6, you get burnt out as someone who is struggling with ADHD because you push things off, you procrastinate them, especially if you kind of have this perfectionism mindset until you literally have no choice but to do them. And now you're on crunch time. And one of like the reviews that I got at my old job, which at the time I remember being like so taken aback by it and so upset by it, but now it makes so much sense to me that like there would be certain things where I would make like a tiny grammatical error, or I would make a mistake on sending the email to the wrong person, or I would make like just these tiny little errors that never like completely negatively impacted my job. But it was also like, Taylor, like, why do you continue to fuck up? But it was all tied into the fact that I would procrastinate these tasks until I absolutely had to get them done. And then I would be rushing to get them done, that the quality of my work was not nearly as high as it should have been. And now, like recognizing these things in myself, I feel like I'm able to actually take the time to like double check things and make sure that the work that I am putting out is actually high quality work. But like I said, number 6 is also burnout. It's really easy for people with ADHD to reach the point of just mental and physical burnout. This is something that I'm definitely still working on and struggling with because running your own businesses, it's really hard to not get into like that burnout phase. And people on here might run their own businesses and be like, no, it's not. I have no issue with it. But your girl is still struggling to kind of find that balance and figure out how to not burn herself out and make sure that I understand that everything doesn't have to be perfect. Number 7, overstimulation. I had no idea that this was related to ADHD. So there are times where like when Zach and I are in a busy grocery store, or like I can remember we went to an Iowa Hawkeye game last year and there was a point where we were in the tunnel and it was a really hot day and there were so many people, there was so much sun, there was so much heat, and I was like, I need to leave. Like I have to get out of here. I feel like I'm going to lose my mind. And I just thought it was like claustrophobia, but it's actually overstimulation because the same thing happens to me when I go to like the grocery store when it's too busy and there's too many people, or if something is just too loud and I'm already like feeling overstimulated. If like, oh my God, for the love of God, the freaking fan that goes above your food when you're cooking, that thing is one of the most overstimulating things to me. Or if there's like multiple sounds going on, like if the TV is going, if Zach's watching something on his phone, if the overhead thing is going, it's so easy for me to get overstimulated and irritable. And I never understood like why that would irritate me so much. And I would always feel bad when we'd be like out and about and grocery shopping or like at the mall, and I would get overstimulated and like lash out or like be sassy to Zach. And it's like, he did nothing wrong. Like, why are you upset? And now I understand that the overstimulation was what was causing those feelings. I forgot what number we're on, but being forgetful or losing things, the amount of times that I ask my husband where my phone is at, the amount of times in a day, I lose this thing all the time. Same thing with like, if I put things somewhere when I am not medicated, that thing is gone. I'm not going to remember where it's at. Like I do that shit all the time. I just forget. Like I'll set it down somewhere, I'll move on to the next task, and I'll just forget where I put those things down. Phone and wallet are 2 really big ones for me. Auditory processing. So when I have always been a very visual learner. Like I've always said in school, I need things to be like drawn out for me. And I also need to be very hands-on and like do them myself. And that's how I learn. Like the way that I would study is I would draw things out and I would rewrite the lectures and lessons that I was listening to, because that was the only way that it actually stuck in my brain. And I had no idea that like struggling with auditory processing is something that is tied into ADHD, but it heavily is. And that's still something that I process. I saw Cameron Rogers make a comment about this recently with like the Taylor Swift songs, where she's like, I'm always reminded of how bad my auditory processing is with ADHD when Taylor Swift releases a new album. I'm like, oh my God, yes. It is so hard for me if I'm not directly looking at the lyrics, like especially with Tortured Poets Department, because it is like so intricate when it comes to the lyrics, and there's 31 fucking songs, which I'm thrilled about, but also like now I have to learn the lyrics to 31 songs. That's a lot for my brain. And so if I'm not directly looking at those lyrics, completely like struggle so much to actually understand them and actually be able to process them. And then last but not least, oh, actually I have one more to add to this that I just thought of, but another one is continually starting a new task before finishing the current one. So like an example would be, especially when the kitchen is like messy, like cooking dinner, for example, it'd be like, I'd be chopping onions, but something would be on the stove. So I would go tend to the thing that was on the stove, but then I'd go back to chopping the onions, but then I left the tomato out over here and I need to clean up that tomato because I don't want it going rotten and it needs to go into the fridge. But then also now I've added the meat to the pan and the meat needs to be browned. Otherwise it's going to stick to the pan and it's going to overheat. But also I need to make sure that I finish chopping this onion because I have to add it in when I add in the meat. And oh my God, I also forgot that I need to call and make a doctor's appointment tomorrow. And does Luigi need groomed next week? I don't think I've booked him a grooming appointment. And oh my God, I also forgot that they need flea and tick medication. Should I place an order for flea and tick medication? And oh my God, I need to go back to the task of actually browning the meat that I already put on the stove. Like that I just completely made up. But that is literally the way in which my brain works and how I would go from like, I would see a task that needed done, like cleaning. I would see that the floor was dirty, but I had already started wiping down the counters, but I was like, okay, but now I need to clean the floor. So I would plug in the steam mop to get it going, and then I would finish cleaning the counters, and I'd come over and completely forget that I had plugged in the steam mop to start mopping. And so like continually starting a new task before finishing the current one. This was also something that was really hard for me with starting a business, because there are so many intricacies when it comes to like starting an LLC, running a new program. And I would want to like, I'd get into a task where then I couldn't figure out how to finish it. So then I would just start something new. And Zach was like, no. We need to finish this task before we move on to the next task, which is something that I've gotten a lot better at now that I'm aware of it. But I never really realized that that was why I kind of hopped around from task to task all the time. And then the last one is texting. I am the worst texter in the entire world. And it's only gotten worse the more that I've been on social media. And any of my friends and family who are listening to this also know this, because I spend so much time in brain space. And like, I'm not complaining about this. I'm so happy to like talk to you guys in my DMs, but I put this intense pressure on myself that when people DM me, because I love this community so much, and like, you guys are the reason that I get to do this on a daily basis. I want to take that time to respond to you and to connect with you and to talk with you. Like, that makes me and fills me with so much joy. But at the same time, when that's now part of my job, it's hard for my brain to differentiate like texting and DMing. And by the time I get done like answering DMs on TikTok, answering DMs on Instagram, which by the way, if you're listening to this and you've ever DM'd me on TikTok, I've kind of gotten to the point where it's really, really hard for me to keep up with DMs there. So if you really want to get a hold of me, DM me on Instagram, because I do try to check those every single morning and answer as many as I possibly can. But by the time I get to texting, it's almost like I'm so burnt out that I just can't even like use the brain power to respond. Or if I see a text message, like whether it's for work or it's for, a family member that needs assistance or support, if I see that it needs a lot of my brain and like processing, I will look at it and I'll be like, okay, I need to respond to that later because I'm not thinking about that exact subject right now. So I need to wait until I can consciously think about that exact subject. And then I'll get distracted by another task, and then I'll get 10 more text messages, and then that text message will get moved to the bottom of the oblivion. And then I won't think about that text until I need to text that person about something couple days later, a week later, and then I feel like a shitty person because I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I never responded to your previous text and now I'm just asking you for something. But like my friends and family who are listening to this, I'm so sorry that I am the worst texter. And this is exactly why, because that's what my brain goes through when like texting. Same thing with audio messages. Like a lot of my friends and I just kind of audio message back and forth because it's easier than texting. But at the same time, if I don't have the brain space or I'm not focused on listening to that audio message, I'm in this mindset that like, I don't want to listen to this right now because I want to make sure that I'm actually focused on it when I listen to it. So texting, emails, all of those things are another thing that is very challenging for me. So those are all of the symptoms that I have tied to ADHD, and there's a ton of other ones that are tied to it as well. But the reason that I wanted to share all of those is because I want to try to remove this stigma around it. Like I said, I think a lot of people just think of it as, oh, you can't focus, you are squirreled, like you're just constantly thinking about other things. But the reality is like all of those things that I just mentioned are heavily tied to the way in which my brain processes information. And it's just different from other people. And that's okay. Like it's definitely something that I've had to kind of come to terms with and something that I've had to accept over time. I don't know why, but like I was never nervous to talk about the fact that I had anxiety on social media. But then when I got diagnosed with ADHD, I was like, I don't want to tell my family. I don't want to tell my friends. I don't really want to tell social media. But then I also kind of came to this idea of like how many other women are feeling this way who have gotten diagnosed later in life and they're scared to tell people. Like maybe me telling my story will be that kind of gateway for another woman to get the help that she needs. So that's why I ultimately ended up like sharing my story on social media, kind of sharing about my misdiagnosis and all of those things. Now, I know I had said when I initially went into therapy that I was really against medication, but I had gotten to the point where I had worked with my therapist for a couple of months and I was like, we could clearly see that my ADHD was really affecting my daily life in a lot of different ways. And I wanted to try medication to see how it impacted me. So I tried Adderall. I tried short-acting Adderall first. And I did take it for about 4 months pretty consistently. I went from 5 milligrams twice a day to 10 milligrams twice a day. And then I was just taking 15 milligrams once a day. And the reason that I ended up stopping was because it impacted my appetite so much. I had no interest in food. Nothing sounded good. And I was losing weight from it. And I had talked to my therapist about this and I was like, my eating disorder recovery is more important to me than taking this medication. Like, I understand that my ADHD is also something that I need to address and something that needs to be taken care of. But at the same time, I can't slip back in to eating disorder habits. And I feel like not having an appetite, not being able to feel my hunger and fullness cues, it's something that I'm not comfortable with and I don't want to keep doing. She was fully supportive of that. So we talked to my psychiatrist and my psychiatrist was like, well, we could try long-acting Adderall, which I think Vyvanse is like not the generic brand, but like the name brand. And then I was just on like long-lasting Adderall, essentially. I was taking 15 milligrams of long-acting Adderall and I definitely didn't notice as much of an impact on like my appetite and kind of some of those other symptoms. So some of the other symptoms of the short acting were dry mouth, headaches, and then irritability. So like while I was on the medication during the day, I would feel really good. But then when I started to like come down, I guess you could say, at the end of the night, I would find myself getting very irritable or angry very easily. And like specifically with Zach, which was not fair to him because I was like, it's not your fault that I'm feeling this way and that my medication is making me feel this way. So I just want to I don't want to be on it for those reasons. So those are all of the side effects that I was having with the short acting. Now the long acting, I had much less side effects on. My only big side effects were dry mouth and then horrible insomnia. If I was not taking my little garden gummy, which I usually take those like 3-ish times a week, sometimes 4 times a week, if I was not taking a garden gummy, I could not fall asleep. And then when I finally did fall asleep, I was up at 2 or 3 in the morning and my heart rate was just all over the place. I could not fall back asleep. My Oura Ring data was absolutely awful. My HRV balance, my heart rate, all of those different types of things were just out of absolute whack. And I was like, okay, once again, sleep is more important to me, high quality sleep, because I know how much sleep impacts performance and fitness. I know how much sleep impacts my food choices, my hunger and fullness cues. I know how much it impacts my body's recovery. Those things are more important to me than this. And this all happened very recently. So I took short acting Adderall from about November of 2023 until like February of 2023. I started the long acting in March. It's now the end of April. I've been taking that one for about a month, and I recently went off of it. So it's been since April like 2nd or 3rd. I've been off of Adderall at all. I've taken like a couple long acting throughout the month if I really have to get some shit done, and I don't really have like I don't want to say that I need it, but it most definitely does help me get through my work a lot easier and helps me organize my brain. Something I didn't notice, like I think that also coming off of it for a month has really shown me like what my baseline is and how it really does negatively impact my day in a lot of different ways. And it's really hard for me to be creative. I don't get nearly as much work done nearly as quickly. Like I was getting work done by like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, minus like obviously seeing clients. But then it was like, now it takes me until like 6 o'clock at night to get all of my work done. And that's also because I doom scroll in the middle of the day. I do other things that like I distract myself from anything besides the task at hand. And so what I'm trying to navigate now with my psychiatrist and my therapist is potentially an option that is not a stimulant. So something like Strattera is the name of the drug. I've never tried this one. It's something that I'm discussing. Also, like I'm just sharing my personal story. Please talk to your doctor about all of these things if you are resonating with anything that I'm saying, because they're going to be able to give you like a more clear picture and a more clear diagnosis. This is just my personal experience and my story. So I'm going to talk to my psychiatrist about Strattera and see if that is something that's a potential option. If that one also does not work for me, to be totally honest with you, I don't know what my next steps are. I've been having this internal struggle and this internal battle, and like I'm just being fully transparent with you guys about it because I want like I as someone on the internet, like I try to be very real about things, and so this is something that I feel like you have to be real about when it comes to mental health. And so if the Strattera doesn't work for me, I'm stuck between this hard place of I don't like how stimulants make me feel, but at the same time, I feel like I'm not getting the things done that I need to get done because I'm struggling so much mentally and my anxiety is so much higher when I'm not on the medication. So these are all things that I'm really thinking about and really trying to consider, not to mention the fact that you cannot be on an ADHD medication when you're pregnant. That's something that Zach and I want in not necessarily like the near future, but within the next 1 to 2 years. And so it's something else that's in the back of my mind of like, I don't want to become someone who needs this drug to function and to survive when I get pregnant, come off of it, and then am I going to have withdrawals? Is it going to be really hard to function? I know that all these things happen during when you're perinatal. So when you're pregnant, I know that there's a lot of emotions and a lot of anxiety. Like, is there something else that could potentially benefit me? I've also looked into a lot of natural options. I personally haven't tried any of them yet because we're trying to just kind of rule out medications. And then if it comes to the point where medications just simply aren't working for me, I want to try some natural remedies. So if you have ADHD and you have found successful natural remedies that aren't stimulants, please let me know. I would love to hear all of the things because, like I said, it's an internal battle that I'm currently struggling with. And it's something that I don't necessarily talk a lot about on my platform because, yes, I shared my ADHD story, but my mental health has also been something that's really been, you just heard the story. There's a lot that's been going on behind the scenes for the last like 6-ish months. And it's something that I'm just really trying to navigate and figure out. But the reason that I wanted to make a podcast on it and wanted to share about these things is because I also think that it's really important to talk about mental health and to also destigmatize some of the mental health conditions that are not, I don't want to say like anxiety and depression are trendy because that sounds awful, but I also feel like there's just this idea that like it's okay to say that you have anxiety and depression, but like when someone says you have ADHD, or ADD, they're just like, oh my God, just focus. Like that's it. Like, or, people make a lot of comments about Adderall and like, yes, I get it. It's an amphetamine. Like, do you think that I enjoy taking it? No, but it's the only time in my life where my brain has ever been quiet. Has only ever been quiet. I'm able to think about a task and execute the task. And that's it. And I've never felt that way with ever in my life. The first day that I took Adderall, I remember looking at Zach and being like, oh my God, this is what this is what normal people feel like. Like, this is what your brain feels like. And he was like, yeah, that's what it feels like. And that's where I'm just like in this inner battle and kind of struggle of what I really want to do. But that is all the current updates when it comes to my mental health journey and just kind of the story of how I've gotten to the place that I am in now. And like I said, please talk to your doctor. Don't use my story as a diagnosis for yourself. I more so just want to share it to help to destigmatize this, and then to also make sure that if you do resonate with this, reaching out to your doctor and deciding what's best for you and your mental health. And also that, like I said, I went through a lot of my life thinking not only with like mental health, but also my eating disorder, that I wasn't sick enough, that I could manage it on my own, that I didn't need the extra help. But the reality is that it's not a failure to ask for help. And that's kind of like the primary message that I want to this episode to be, is that if you feel like you need help with your mental health, with an eating disorder, with disordered eating, with literally anything, you don't have to be quote unquote sick enough or to your breaking point in order to ask for help. Trust me, I'm someone who's reached both those points. I've reached a breaking point with my mental health. I've reached a too sick point with orthorexia. You need to ask for help sooner. If you have any thought in your brain that help would be beneficial, I highly encourage you to ask someone. So thank you so much for listening. As always, I love you guys so freaking much. Thank you for the love on the podcast. Thank you for sharing the podcast. If you feel like this would resonate with someone you love, please feel free to share it with them. I appreciate you guys so much, and I love you. I will talk to you next Tuesday. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Simply Balanced. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing a part of your day with me. I hope you find inspiration in our discussion and feel more equipped to embrace the balanced girl aesthetic in your daily life. Remember, balance is a journey, not a destination. It's about finding what works for you in your unique way. As we part ways, I encourage you to reflect on one thing you learned today and how you can incorporate that into your life to create more balance. Don't forget to subscribe to Simply Balanced so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed our time together, consider leaving a review or sharing the podcast with a friend. Your support means the world, and until next time, keep striving for balance, nourish your body and mind, and remember to cherish life's simple pleasures. This is Taylor Grasso signing off. Stay balanced and see you next episode.